Hello, welcome to my channel. Today I will share with you 3 hacks to save your painting when the tape fails or even rips up your paper. While making a quick watercolor pencil draft just to test some colors, my paper ripped. I decided to use this opportunity to show you how I handle it when the tape damages the paper. When the paper gets damaged, it can be so frustrating, as removing the tape is usually done after you already completed your painting. Let me show you what I do to save my artwork. The painting I'm using for today's demonstration is painted with watercolor pencils, but you can apply the same hacks when you use watercolors. On a side note, I noticed the tape ripping the paper when I started to remove it, and then decided to get my camera out and not follow any of my own advice, so that I can record this video for you. Let's start at the beginning with some tips on how to avoid common issues with the tape. Usually, the tape rips up a layer of the paper when it is too sticky. One thing that can help to avoid it is to make the tape less sticky by sticking it to a piece of your clothing first. I personally only do this when I have an extremely sticky tape, like painter's tape. It happened to me before that the tape was not sticky enough anymore after taping it to my clothing first. This can allow the pigment to run under the tape, and the tape also would not hold the painting down to the table. Something else that can help to avoid damaging the paper is your technique in removing the tape. Try to remove the tape by grabbing it closer to the paper and pull it away from the center of the paper. Also, avoid the beginner mistake. Wait until the core of the paper is completely dry. Wet paper is more fragile and rips easier. You can, in principle, reuse the tape from a previous painting, but it might not be as evenly sticky, allowing the pigment to run under it. It's also possible that some pigment might have already run under it, possibly transferring onto the paper from the sticky side. In addition, you might have bent the tape with your watercolor pencil while painting, and when you reuse it, you will not be able to create a perfectly straight line. Let's begin with the first hack I use to fix the paper. This fix is for when the tape roughens up your paper but does not completely rip it. When the paper is not completely smooth on the white border, this is something that is very noticeable to everyone who sees your artwork. I use a small brush to wetten the unpainted area of the paper. I use completely clean water and a clean brush. It is important to be careful when you apply the water to the paper, as you can reactivate the watercolor and smush it. Also, the paper towel I'm using needs to be clean or dry. It is possible to reactivate the watercolor in the paper towel and transfer it onto the paper. It is impossible to expect everyone to have a completely clean and dry emergency paper towel at hand, so I'm turning my paper towel to a dry area. I'm keeping the expectations here very realistic. After the water had a minute to sink into the paper, I use a paper towel to press the paper fibers down. I press hard and do not ever drag the paper towel around for best results, and to avoid reactivating some of the pigment in the paper towel or from the paper. If there are pencil lines to erase, I fix the paper first and always wait until the paper is completely dry, so that I don't damage the paper any further. The second hack I have for you is to paint over the little imperfections by the border to create a straight line. You might have to straighten out either side of the hard line. Let's start with the colored side first. Usually the hard line did not come out straight when the tape did not stick properly, or it ripped the smallest amount from the paper when you removed it. Either way, when the paper is not completely flat, you should use the hack number 1 first to flatten the paper structure before continuing. I'm using watercolor pencil to fill in the white spots, and straighten the lines this way. I'm usually applying the pigment to a wider area than just the one spot that remained white, as it makes it easier to blend it in. Depending on how busy the painting is in the damaged area, it can be easier or harder to blend new pigment in. When you use your watercolor pencil, adding a layer of non-activated pencil can give the affected area more structure and therefore make it easier to camouflage and therefore hide the fix. The second side that might need fixing is the white border. I like to use gouache here to reclaim some of the white areas. Before doing this, you should always try to lift as much of the pigment as possible. The wet gouache can reactivate the dry pigment and mix with it, creating a colored gouache. To lift pigment, simply wetten the area with clear water and scrub the area a little with a wet brush to reactivate the pigment, and then soak it up with a paper towel. Let it dry before moving on. Gouache is not translucent and helps to fix paint splatters. Be careful to not let it get in areas with watercolor pencil or watercolor, as you cannot paint over it again. These spots will look noticeably different due to the difference in material you paint on. In order to blend the gouache better to the white border, I apply it to an area which is wider than the area that needs covering up. I then use a brush to blend the outer edges of gouache to the paper with some water. Adding just an unblended circle of gouache would make the transition from gouache to paper noticeable when the painting is dry. An important reminder: when using gouache, always clean your brush, palette, the table, clothing or jewelry really well immediately, as it is not easily water dissolvable like watercolor pigment. It can easily dry and harden in your brush, making the brush unusable. I learned this the hard way when I missed a spot. Let's move on to hack number 3. When a larger part of the paper layer came off, you can try hack number 1 and 2, and then eventually have to move on to hack number 3, the nuclear option. I cut the damaged areas off. There have been paintings in the past where I could avoid this. How well hack number 1 and 2 work to avoid having to cut the painting largely depends on your paper. Let me explain. You probably already have noticed that the top layer of most papers is different from the rest of it. It's like a smooth seal. Once that is off, the underlying layer absorbs the pigment differently, making it visibly different when the artwork is dry. Also, you will most likely see the actual edges of where the paper layer ripped. If you really want to have a white border around your painting, for example to fit a specific frame, you can always just tape the painting to some white watercolor paper. I recommend to be mindful in choosing that paper, as usually paper can have a different structure or shade of white, and that can just look weird when you combine them. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you found it useful. Please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fun videos.